So it's no secret that the American student loan system is broken. Americans who took out student loans currently owe upwards of 1.7 trillion US dollars. Student loan debt now exceeds both credit card and vehicle loan balances within the United States itself, with more than 40 million US citizens footing this 1.7 trillion bill. Higher education expenditures have skyrocketed while incomes have remained pretty much stagnant, leading to a record high in the amount of debt carried by graduates themselves. This amount has risen to a staggering 30,000 US dollars average from 12,000 US dollars back in 1980. The federal student loan system has been beset by problem after problem even way before the current inflation crisis and the COVID pandemic, when the US was actually having one of its strongest economical periods in history, and nothing was done. It's estimated that in 2019, only half of debtors were making any kind of repayment. Moreover, 10 million borrowers were either delinquent or in default, and another 5 million requested some form of assistance in forms of deferrals or forbearance. Now, all of these bailouts, deferences, and problems with debt were all relevant just up until a couple of weeks ago when President Biden planned to forgive hundreds of billions of student loan debt. Now, this was a shock to many that it came sort of just off the cuff, but this debt relief has been in the talk and in the press for a hell of a long time. During the 2020 election, major Democratic candidates competed for those who would give the most amount of student loans. Elizabeth Warren of Massachusetts proposed writing off 50,000 US dollars in student loans for nearly all borrowers from her first day in office if she was elected, which is absolute insanity. Bernie Sanders went one step further, saying he would forgive absolutely everything on student debt if he was in turn elected, and went one step further, saying that he would guarantee that everybody smashed the like button on this video. Okay, one of those points was made up. On the campaign trail, Biden himself supported student loan forgiveness of up to 10,000 US dollars, which was much more modest and realistic than his liberal opponent. But since elected, the president has been under constant pressure to deliver on his promise, and now it seems he has. So what exactly are these benefits? Who do they account for, and what extent can people claim? For students who received a federal Pell Grant and those whose loans are serviced by the Department of Education, this proposal will forgive up to 20,000 US dollars of debt, while non-grant students will be forgiven up to 10,000 US dollars, and those whose annual salaries are less than 125,000 US dollars or less, or 250,000 if you are a married couple, are eligible for debt forgiveness too. The White House claims that the proposal will bring much-needed relief to 43 million people in debt, with the balances of about 20 million of those people being completely forgiven, meaning that if you have just been forgiven of your 10 grand of debt, or in some cases 20, or maybe even all, at this point, why not? Let's just give out free candy bars. But here's what you should do. You should take that money and invest it wisely, and what better way to do that than with eToro. If you signed up with eToro via the links down on the pinned comment, there's one for the US and one for the rest of the world. You get a lifetime pass to our chat room. It's a broker I use constantly on a daily basis, so if you're interested in checking it out, sign up via the links down on the pinned comment. Now, it's obvious the question that comes to mind to everybody else, in fact, the actual majority in this case, what about everybody else? It's clear there will be some winners and many losers with Biden's new proposal. Let's consider all those who don't qualify for this debt relief, but in fact, actually will end up paying for the bill. The first group of people who do not qualify and will end up paying for the bill are those who did not attend university. If this is you, then it's a fair question. Why you? A person who did not have the opportunity to go to college and are paying for the education of other Americans. The widespread cancellation of student loan debt in the United States is understandably being seen as an insult to the hard-working blue-collar American who sometimes struggles to make ends meet. A total of 1.7 trillion is owned by near 45 million borrowers on student loans. There are over 250 million adults in the United States alone, which indicates about 80% of Americans do not have student loan debt or have never had it in the first place. Now, the second type of person who's going to be annoyed by this bill are those who've actually took on the responsibility and went and paid off the debt themselves. For those who've already paid off their student loans, here hearing that others who haven't been as responsible as you having their debt forgiven would be, well, quite infuriating, let alone upsetting. It's like purchasing a present for somebody at Christmas, only to find out the day after you bought it, the store changed their policy and they're giving them out for free now. And no matter what you do, you can't take this present back, get a credit, a refund, and for sure, no exchanges. You just get to live your life knowing you're an absolute schmuck. Those who did actually take the responsibility and pay off their student loan debts have had to make sacrifices like not buying a house, put off their retirement savings, forego holidays, and sometimes in a lot of cases, work more than 2 jobs. What's the point of all this hard work if the government's just gonna bail you out for being irresponsible? Now, the third person who it's going to affect is the future generations of students. Future borrowers of student loans are actually going to be inversely affected by these massive debt cancellations. Why? First thing is, there's a good chance that this debt cancellation will only be relevant for those right now. Now, to put this into more clear and stark terminology, if you have an outstanding student loan debt on the day you're a student, the loan forgiveness is implemented, well, you're in luck. But if you started university a year later, you are no longer eligible for student loan forgiveness as it stands. Some students might be irresponsible, as a lot of students tend to be with their student loans, and take on additional debts in the hopes that they are gonna be forgiven. And again, that might not be the case, causing a longer-term economical problem for future generations. As it stands, there's no clear indication that student loan forgiveness will be continued into the future, so we just have to assume it's only for those lucky few who fall in this very small bracket right now. But aside from the winners and losers of this whole debt forgiveness, the root cause of this debt crisis is the increase in education costs itself. And that problem is just not being solved. Now, the big concern for me is, imagine they continue forgiving student debt. What do you think is going to happen to the universities and colleges? They're not going to decrease their prices. It's now a government-supplied, funded project. You're going to increase your prices, meaning the bill the taxpayer has to pay will eventually just continue going upwards. President Biden's gift to students, plus increased access to low-interest loans, will only serve as a drive to the already exorbitant education expenses. Unless other changes are brought in to fix the root cause, like changes to the federal financial aid, then according to the Committee for Responsible Fed Budget, outstanding student loan debt would rise back up to the present level of 1.6 trillion in just 4 years. Analysts also indicate that even if all student debt were to be wiped away, the current level of money owed would return in just 15 years. Again, band-aid decapitation. The Foundation for Economical Education found that during the early 60s through to the 70s, the cost of education was between 18 and 19% of a family's income. Then in 1973, Sallie Mae was founded by Congress to provide subsidized student loans, and by 1978, college costs had already begun to rise 45% of a typical family's income. Biden's student loan forgiveness will only do nothing but accelerate the trend in higher costs to future generations of students. By the government subsidizing costs and taking the responsibility from students going and taking out courses that they might never even study in, it's just putting a bigger burden on the government and the taxpayer, and education costs will coincidentally rise in tandem. In fact, even Obama's economical advisor Larry Summers pointed out that reducing student loan debt would promote demand and inflation, and this uses up vital funds that could be used to actually help people who cannot go to college at all. And of course, tuition increases are another inflationary factor in an already crazy inflation environment. But at this point, what's a little bit more gasoline on the already raging inflation fire? Now, unless you went to a moderately overpriced university, you might actually not know what a trigger warning is. But it's basically a warning that somebody is about to be brutally honest. And here is a trigger warning to those who might be sensitive to this video. Let me spell it out. This debt forgiveness plan is absolutely fucking insane. And let me summarize why in very clear and definitive points. 1 in 7 Americans actually owe money to the government in forms of a student loan. More than 65% of Americans actually didn't even go to college in the first place. People with graduate degrees, which are often linked to greater salaries than undergraduate degrees, carry 50% of all student loan debt. Inflation is currently bad enough, and this will only make tuition more unaffordable to those people who can't afford it anyway, and create an even more bigger crisis in the future. Why should we, those who didn't go to college, or those who did pay off their debt, front the bill for those in the future? I understand helping out people who can't afford it, but the reality is there are people who need this money more than those who now have a college degree. Now, am I terribly out of my mind for saying this? Give me a piece of your mind down in the comments. I'm happy to have some educated dialogue with you. I'd also love to be shown why 80% of Americans should front your bill so that you can get your fashion degree and never work in the fashion industry. And if this video has rustled your jimmy jammy so much you cannot even formulate a finger to type with, just smash one of them thumbs up or down buttons. Either way, it greatly helps me out. So for those of you who made it this far in the video, the code word is debt, and your reward for smashing the like button is, of course, a dad joke. In college, I was personally so broke, I couldn't afford the electricity bill. And it still saddens me. In fact, it was the darkest time of my life.